This is another IO Psychology Bootcamp video. My name is Josh and I study IO Psychology, or otherwise known as Industrial Organizational Psychology. This video will be a bit different from my others. My videos so far have been quick, simple lessons, but that's mostly because I wanted to build up the skills necessary to dive into more meaningful topics and get a little practice in. This video will be backed by research and theory, but ultimately it is about the experience of a single employee on the autism spectrum, myself. Before recording this video, I've spent a lot of time reaching out to other individuals on the spectrum in a multitude of careers to see if the concepts I'm portraying resonated with them. And I'm both happy and saddened to say that repeatedly I'm hearing that my experience is an anomaly. I've worked projects with nonprofits, spent time working in de facto leadership roles on projects, and in both interim and official leadership capacities as someone on the spectrum, and though my experience is unique in its own right, I do hope this video resonates with those who have similar experiences while also building a bridge of understanding to those who work with or want to work with individuals on the spectrum. So I personally was diagnosed late in life, but early on the signs were there. As a child, I remember distancing myself from most of my peers over time due to the inability to kind of form connections in the same way. I loved science, reading, and problem solving more than anything else, and in second or third grade, I was kind of viciously mocked for organizing my books meticulously and highlighting the ones that I loved most. By third or fourth grade, I remember that there was speculation that I could be a little off, but my mom asserted that I was gifted. This kind of pipelined me into what some people may remember as the gifted student program and eventually a magnet school. Sometime around that period, it was discussed about potentially skipping grades, but my social skills were a concern. I was both too much and not enough. Existing in any space as someone on the spectrum kind of feels like you're just not in the right spot. I don't think I know any individuals who outright hate autistic people, but there's this nagging sense of inconvenience. Growing up, I remember countless times I thought that I had someone who was a friend, only to find out that my presence served as a joke or a means of kind of feeling superiority, right? Even when approaching people with kindness, it seems that people almost see me as an uncanny valley of human experience. It's not that I typically say things that are mean, but the things that I say are just a bit off. It makes it incredibly challenging to know who supports me in my growth, as opposed to who is behaving politely out of charity. Frankly, sometimes I wish that people just outright hated people on the spectrum as opposed to this nagging sense of semi-tolerance. Outright hate can be talked through and addressed, but when someone recognizes that you are maybe generally kind, you try to do your best, but just happen to be different, it's no longer hate, but rather just discomfort. You can't really talk through someone disliking you because of the vibes. Whereas other groups overcome hatred through hard conversations, autistic adults are trapped in this middle ground that doesn't breed meaningful conversation. It's too much of a challenge for organizations to work around, but it's not enough to warrant real hatred. Once again, too much and not enough. That's why despite qualifications, up to 85% of autistic adults are unemployed or employed below their credentials and capabilities, especially those deemed low support needs with college degrees, kind of like myself. Even the best organizations tend to fall flat and don't know how to manage this challenge, and the research on autistic individuals, adults specifically, is far more limited than on autistic children. I find myself in the same trap. People are generally perfectly fine with me working on short projects, and I got the opportunity to present to 300 people on leadership methodology and how to improve leadership from a multicultural standpoint. But I find even myself questioning my capabilities of being a leader despite the wins I've had over the years. When I was asked to present on that, I remember going to someone who I do know is an advocate for me and saying, I don't know why they'd pick me. There's so many people who are maybe easier to work with, maybe better at it, right, have had more time doing it. And that was as I was already a established expert in that field, right? So it comes down to there's so many conversations around finding yourself, loving who you are, and being yourself to become the best version of who you can be. But what happens to those who do love themselves, love the people around them even, and yet find that society around them doesn't love them in equal measure? I cherish the time I get to reflect and to do solo activities. I love who I am as a person, and yet I still see the eye rolls when I speak up in a conversation. Perhaps because I'm autistic, it's assumed that I don't pick up on those cues, or I'm unable to acknowledge when someone's annoyed by my presence. But it's there, and consistently reinforced through my interactions every day. I find myself caring too much about the happiness of those around me and not enough about myself, because those impressions fuel my career, my future, my ability to take care of myself and my family. And once again, I'm in the same paradox of being too much, but also not enough. Even the diagnosis of autism presented its own challenges. I believe that I could use this knowledge to better myself, but I had immediate doubts around sharing what I had found. Would I be treated differently for my diagnosis? A common trend for autistic and ADHD individuals. They're kind of afraid to expose that part of themselves because they know the impressions it will create. Or would I be able to maybe be an inspiration to others with similar struggles? It was heartbreaking to find that after my diagnosis, despite my continued persistence towards leadership, the conversations began to trend towards how I should look into analytical roles, numbers, or pure strategy. You're uncomfortable after all, but you do know your business. Let's find a place where we can put you where you can do good work, but won't have to interact with people too much. Not enough value to be a real leader, but too much to simply let go of, right? Once again, too much and not enough. Maybe I was missing something, of course. I reached out to other autistic individuals at higher levels of operation in both the business I worked in and in a multitude of other organizations. After all, they've succeeded, so they should have a different viewpoint, right? But I found the same story time and time again. A demographic that felt ignored. A demographic where even as experts in their field, they weren't listened to, and outcomes were poorer because of it. I experienced this myself in a project I worked on. It was right within the scope of my education and something I specialized in. So I was brought in to help assist with it. I had built the necessary presentation for an early part of the project and was expected to present it. An individual 3 levels above me had even said as much, but then a manager told me I had misunderstood. When I brought this up to another manager, they had indicated that wasn't the case and I should fight for it. But already I was being seen as someone who was too much once again, a know-it-all who didn't understand how things worked, and to stand up to someone who was doing wrong towards me would become a matter of he said, she said, and I knew that wasn't an area I could compete in. I knew that feeling was circling already because someone who I had mentored came to me after overhearing 2 managers talking negatively about me. How I thought I knew everything because I would try to voice opportunities for us to build up even further. Even though my organization would do the right thing at a larger scale, I knew my director supported me, I couldn't trust those around me to do so. And so I stepped out of the project, which then, slowly failed and showed minimal return on investment. My desire to work above my role was too much, but my ability to defend myself and build the relationships that would help defend me weren't enough. Once again, too much and not enough. Even further, we have current conversations around the horrors of autism, that people like myself shouldn't have a family, that vaccines or medications or whatever variable that is the flavor of the week causes people to be like me, and that is unacceptable. It would be a tragedy to have someone in your family who has my same neurological phenotype, my same mannerisms, my same communication style. These conversations occur around the value of my life as an autistic individual, and I sit and watch them as I know that I myself am not invited to the conversation that is about me. My experience put on display as a tragedy by people who won't even bother to ask what my experience is like. I mean, if you have autistic people in your life, I would challenge you to ask them how they actually feel about their lives, because every autistic individual I know has their passion, their happiness, and their purpose, just like everyone else. It reminds me of an event I helped at a nonprofit with a volunteer event around assisting autistic adults on the spectrum with higher support needs find meaningful work. I was collaborating with someone who is known to be heavily engaged with charity work in general, and who most people think is a kind, upstanding individual, and I think that too. We contributed around $500 worth of work, and at the end of the event, the nonprofit thanked donors by name for those who had contributed over $5,000. And I remember more than anything the frustration this individual had that their efforts had not been recognized. I don't think we'll continue this relationship and do more of these events because they didn't even bother to recognize us. It wasn't about helping others, but rather reinforcing his brand of kindness, his circle of influence and power. It was a stark reminder that I have to measure the actions of everyone who claims to support individuals like me, and be alert constantly for those who see me and others like me as a charity case that furthers their purpose. This permeates not just into events, but also my individual relationships. So much charity isn't charity as much as it is an enforcement of brand to reinforce power and influence. And we're all worse off for it. Diversity of opinion is what drives innovation. If everyone thinks the same way and operates the same way, then we only get the same ideas. Dell found that individuals on the spectrum were some of their highest performers, so they created the neurodivergent hiring program. They built methodologies that would empower people on the spectrum. It provided incredible results and allowed them to propel themselves forward. So many autistic individuals are held back by the unspoken. They may compete on equal ground with others as far as qualifications go, or even exceed them. But you can't fight a general unease that occurs from differences in communicational phenotypes. It's the same battle that occurs in multicultural integration, but much more subtle and difficult to pin down. They're all too much, but also not enough. Where does this leave us in a society that is openly uncomfortable with our existence, but refuses to open any real conversation around it? Autistic individuals aren't any different than anyone else outside of their unique communication methods. We all want to be accepted. We all want to be loved, to provide value in some way through meaningful work, or to have a family or community that cares. That's why I focused my research on the value and impact autistic people could have in the workplace. That's not to say it's the only value we provide, but so many of us are blocked off from taking care of our loved ones and pursuing the same dreams everyone else has due to perception. It's why autism spectrum disorder is still the #1 disability for underemployment. It's why we can do better and why I'm excited to build further educational videos that can display how. because I believe that people are good deep down, even when I've seen evidence to the contrary, because autistic adults deserve better and can contribute so much, and because no one should feel that they're too much and not enough. So as I begin building more educational videos around effective multicultural leadership, effective multi-communicational phenotype leadership, and leadership in general, I ask you, what can you do to make the world a better place? We are in a time where the problems we are solving are becoming increasingly complex, a time where a multitude of mindsets are required. And I still believe that although society looks down on me at times, that the people I interact with overall are fundamentally good. I know some people may consider that naivety, but I call it hope.